The Hindu Editorial. Credit challenges. Credit flow and all round capital spending must stay supportive. The RBI's report on trend and progress of banking in India paints a picture of credit growth having rebounded smartly, with the consolidated balance sheets of Indian commercial banks showing double digit expansion after a 7-year gap. While at first flush, this would be reason for cheer, this growth came on the back of the pandemic hit year, when economic activity including demand for loans was depressed. However, credit momentum seems to be sustaining in the current fiscal year, too, with loan growth logging a decade high in the first half. And in the fortnight to December 2, credit expanded 17.5% from a year earlier. Still, disappointingly, deposit growth lagged behind, increasingly by only 9.9% in the period, with retail inflation and concerns about price stability eroding savers, real returns as well as confidence to save. Banks have found themselves needing to redouble efforts to shore up deposits to help fund credit demand. Lenders would want to avoid finding themselves relatively short of lower cost capital to lend, especially when the economy is facing the headwinds of a global slowdown. With the quickening of credit growth, the RBI also urged banks to guard against loan slippage. Bank balance sheets have become healthier over the past few years thanks to the central bank's asset quality reviews, mandates for stressed assets recognition, and write offs by commercial banks, as well as loan recoveries under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. The bank's caution is salutary as the sector cannot afford to take its eye off the bad loans status, especially after gross non performing assets, which impinge on banks' ability to lend, saw a decline from the peak in 2017 to 18 to 5% in September 2022. Banks' due diligence on borrowers and solid credit appraisal will help keep NPAs under control even while credit growth helps fund capital expenditure. The chief economic advisor had noted this month that private capex had touched 3 lakh crore rupees in the first half of the year, and if the same pace were maintained, full year figures would be the highest in the last few years. Worryingly, he had also hinted that government capex need not continue to maintain the pace so as to allow private players the space to borrow and invest. However, even given the constraints of fiscal discipline, the government should keep the tempo up on capex as it may take a while for private capex growth to find consistency, with industrial production still on a bumpy ride. Having contracted in 2 of the 7 months, policymakers must ensure credit flow and all round capital spending stay supportive. Second editorial. Friendly neighbors. India must boost ties with Maldives without taking sides in its politics. The conviction of former Maldivian President Abdullah Yamin by a criminal court in the Maldives just a year ahead of general elections could affect his plans to lead the PPM PNC opposition alliance. He faces 11 years in prison and a $5 million fine after being found guilty of corruption and money laundering links to a company he was accused of taking kickbacks from. During his tenure as president 2013 to 2018, the Maldives constitution disqualifies any candidate convicted of criminal charges and sentenced to a term of more than a year unless they are later acquitted for a 3-year period has elapsed since their release. In a sense, history has now come full circle for Mr. Yamin, as he had pursued cases against his predecessor, Muhammad Nasir, and ensured that he would step down in favor of his party colleague, Abu Solih, ahead of the last election. The conviction was his second in 3 cases. Mr. Yamin has had a rough relationship with India during his presidential term after he declared an emergency in the island state. As opposition leader, he was spearheaded the India Out campaign and has been unrepentant despite the latest verdict, trying to link his incarceration to pressure from India. Given the inimical relationship as well as Mr. Yamin's past close links with China, there may be some relief in South Bloc over the possibility of Mr. Yamin's disqualification. However, the government needs to tread carefully when it comes to the domestic politics, roiling its close maritime neighbor. India's infrastructure aid, credit lines, loans, and commissioning of various projects, Greater Malay Connectivity Project, Hani Madhu Airport, Hul Humale Cricket Stadium, Gulhi Falu Port have meant high visibility. In addition, close ties and high level military exchanges since 2018 have raised speculation that India is eyeing a base, even as the Soli government has been prompt in countering Mr. Yamin's allegations, condemning the India Out campaign, and arresting a senior opposition leader for threatening violence against the Indian High Commission. The protests have gained some traction in parts of the country. While Mr. Yamin may not be allowed to run in the next election, this might make space for even more radical elements in the position combined. New Delhi must keep a close watch on other parts of Maldivian politics, including the rift between India's closest friends there, President Soli and former President Nasir, who is threatening to split the ruling Maldivian Democratic Party. Despite having obvious favorites in the polity, New Delhi must actively project the image of the friendly and helpful neighbor without explicitly seeking to sway next year's election in any direction. Thank you.